Hey, quick question. What if your admissions team had 100 AI-powered teammates helping out this application season? That's exactly what Element 451 is showing in their live Zoom demo on March 26. You'll see how AI agents can read applications, flag fraud, and even personalize outreach across email, voice, and WhatsApp. Spots are limited, so grab your seat now at enrollify.org/Bolt Agents. That's BOLT agents.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Advancement Amplified AI for IA, a special 5-part pulse check series brought to you by Enrollify. I'm Dan Giroux, a higher education marketing and communications leader focused on elevating the strategic impact of advancement. Advancement is at a pivotal moment. With shifting donor expectations, alumni engagement challenges, financial pressures, and the demand to do more with less, AI has emerged a transformative force. It offers unprecedented opportunity to reshape and amplify how teams connect, strategize, and deliver results. In this series, we'll explore how AI can be integrated without overwhelming staff, balancing efficiency with authentic human connections, and unlocking strategic innovations for the future. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to Advancement Amplified, AI for IA. If you've been following along, you know we've covered a lot of ground in this series, from AI's growing role in advancement to its impact on teams and workflows. But today we're going to shift our focus to the big picture, high-impact applications of AI in fundraising engagement. It's not just about efficiency, it's about driving transformation. And as institutions look to do more with less, the difference between AI-enabled tools and autonomous AI-driven strategies is becoming more critical. So I'm thrilled to have Adam Martel, CEO of Givzey and version 2 AI, our guest on today's episode. Adam's at the forefront of driving this change in higher education, fundraising, philanthropy, working closely with institutions and senior advancement leaders to develop solutions that can move the needle forward. Adam, welcome to the show. Let's start by giving listeners a bit of your backstory.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation. As a lot of folks know, I was a frontline fundraiser. I grew up in a fundraising family. My mother was a gift processor at Merrimack College. And I spent almost every day in middle school and high school going to her office, open up the checks in the 90s. And, I had a pretty good career as a gift officer, then a major gifts officer. I was at Emmanuel College, Babson College. I was responsible for the entire West Coast. And when I was at Babson, I started the first AI company in the nonprofit tech space, Gravity. And we were specifically working on building the world's first set of AI-enabled tools to help frontline fundraisers expand their portfolios from 200 to about 800. I left that company in 2021. And in May of this past year, we released version 2, which is the world's first fully autonomous frontline fundraiser. And we learned a lot sort of inventing the first set of products at Gravity. And we took all those learnings and really applied the things that we had learned to version 2, develop autonomous fundraising in the space. And now sort of the process of autonomous fundraising is just exploding and the outcomes are really, really just exploding. And really excited to update the community on all we're learning with our early partners as we deploy the world's first autonomous fundraiser.
Appreciate that, Adam. A lot of the higher education, marketing, communication professionals and advancement professionals out there that are going to be listening to this have hopefully been exploring AI tools over the past year or two. Many of the common ones you probably know about, ChatGPT and Copilot and so forth, which integrate generative AI into that. So today's episode, I think it'd be helpful to just give a little bit of background. If you could break down the difference between, from your perspective, what generative AI is and how that works with both AI-enabled tools and then autonomous AI tools.
Yeah. So we were at the forefront of sort of natural language generation, 2016, 2017, and it's evolved so much. A fun fact that I heard yesterday was that OpenAI and ChatGPT, obviously OpenAI's main product, that was only released in November of 2022. So the progress over the past couple of years for generative AI has just been extraordinary. But Dan, there's a really, really clear distinction that I'm not sure many people are making right now, but really need to, between AI-enabled tools for frontline fundraisers and for folks versus autonomous AI. So AI enablement is the ability to use natural language generation and other AI capabilities to empower efficiencies for the people working at organizations. So you take a frontline fundraiser. Can frontline fundraisers use ChatGPT or other generative AI tools to write better, to write at scale? Can they expand and accelerate their work? Can you enable one person to do the work of three? The difference between AI enablement and autonomous AI is that autonomous AI is sort of a lot more like Waymo. It's fully independent. It's determining what it should do next based on what it has done in the past, plus adding a general knowledge base that's really specific to a specific use case. And when you look at autonomous AI, you really end up with duplicate efforts of a really specific job. So when you take a frontline fundraiser, maybe they have 200 donors in their portfolio, and they're using AI-enabled tools to help them manage 500 donors, either with self-writing emails or other types of efficiency gains that you get from AI. The idea with autonomous AI is to take that frontline fundraiser that's managing 500 donors and duplicate that effort so an autonomous AI agent can manage 500 donors at a similar or equal scale. And really, what we're seeing is that there's a labor shortage. The nonprofit sector, frontline fundraisers are at a premium. There's a labor shortage. People don't go to school to be fundraisers. So you have this labor shortage. Every nonprofit, whether they're large, medium, or small, hospitals, higher eds, large, medium, small, just traditional nonprofits, they all face a labor crisis where the majority of their donors aren't being connected and engaged in really thoughtful and inspiring ways. About 95% of donors only receive a piece or two of direct mail, an email or two with direct solicitations, and then maybe one call from somebody at the organization throughout the year. It's just not enough, and it's really one way. So major gift officers, we spend the majority of our time trying to build relationships with 4 or 5% of our donor pools. But what about the other 95%, particularly the rated but unassigned? And that's where virtual engagement officers, autonomous AI really is being applied. But the question of, will autonomous AI take jobs from frontline fundraisers? It's not even a concern because there aren't enough frontline fundraisers. So anybody who thinks that autonomous AI will replace fundraisers probably doesn't understand the economics of most nonprofit organizations. Because if you ask any executive director, any board, they are desperate to hire 2 or 3 times the number of frontline fundraisers they have, because frontline fundraisers are revenue generating. So it really is a math problem, and autonomous AI has such an important role as organizations try to scale their impact.
Adam, I want to dive into the last part a little bit about some of the potential concerns around the role of AI and staff within institutions and organizations doing this work. What are some of the common objections you hear out there when you're presenting on this topic and technology?
Yeah, so it's really evolved over the last 9 months. We introduced the world to autonomous fundraising in May of last year. We put together our first cohort, and we have these cohort models where there's 12 to 15 organizations that are onboarded all together so they can learn together. But the first cohort was onboarded in September, and they're large organizations. They're William & Mary, College of Charleston, Parkland Health, they're San Diego State. They're large organizations that have a lot of donors. Texas State has 240,000 alumni. And they have maybe 50, 60 frontline fundraisers at the very most. They're only managing maybe 10,000 donors out of the 240,000 alumni that they have, leaving 230,000 alumni just receiving direct mail and email. And every time we talk to every organization, the first conversation is, tell us about your giving pyramid. Tell us about your alumni pool. Tell us about how many donors you have, how many alumni you have, how many living alumni you have, and how many donors are managed, and what does your rated but unassigned pool look like? In every organization across the board, the common thread, and this is what's been really interesting, is that they all have between 5 and 10% of their alumni pools that are rated but unassigned. They're donors that can make gifts, but aren't being engaged really at the level they need to be engaged at to bring them close enough to the organization where the organization is truly a priority. So that concept of, again, AI replacing frontline fundraisers, it's apples and oranges. It's really not a question of getting rid of frontline fundraisers. None of the organizations we talk to want to remove or eliminate frontline fundraisers. The real conversation is we have 22 open positions on our website. They've been open for 6 months or a year. We're trying to fill them. They're all frontline fundraiser positions. Not only can we fill them, but every time we do, one of our frontline fundraisers leaves to take another job because there's an attrition problem as well, as we all know in the fundraising space. So it really isn't an either or, which I think early on, a lot of folks positioned autonomous fundraising as, do we want AI replacing fundraisers? And it really was the wrong approach to take when evaluating how AI was going to make an impact in the space, because it's not either or. Right now, at almost 50 organizations, autonomous AI is working collaboratively with traditional frontline fundraising teams, and not one frontline fundraiser has been released or let go or replaced with autonomous AI. we're encouraging folks to hire more. And every one of our customers wants to hire more fundraisers, and they're augmenting their traditional fundraising staffs with digital labor and digital frontline fundraisers.
So, Adam, as you have a couple of cohorts that are starting to adopt and hopefully see success with this technology, there's going to need to continue to be, I'd imagine, a lot of education ongoing to help share what this is capable of and the opportunity around it. How are you, or maybe how are you and your clients, your partners, helping to illustrate that to the profession?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we're doing that I think have been really unique. First of all, the way we've approached onboarding customers and really getting the autonomous AI technology out has really been to embody a more of a research approach than a software company. Our mission is to build the world's most advanced and experienced frontline fundraiser using autonomous AI so that we can provide organizations with trusted digital labor and digital capacity for frontline fundraising. And so as we approach this, our mission was to research, develop, and accelerate the deployment of autonomous AI, really acting from a humble perspective and taking the posture that we want to be humble in our approach. We want to make sure that we continue to remind ourselves that we're learning. So we put together these cohorts as R&D partnerships. So the first 13 organizations, they weren't folks that were piloting autonomous AI. They were folks that were committed to the vision that we presented, me and my team, that autonomous AI, digital labor, is going to play a significant and major role in the next 3 to 5 years. And basically, our industry is tired of having sales tools applied and put on frontline fundraisers. These were folks that believed that their presidents they all had AI initiatives, that their boards were asking them to evaluate artificial intelligence tools, and that they wanted to be part of building the future, not just for their organizations, but for our industry. And I think that approach of an R&D cohort, that approach of partnership, and that approach of transparency, every week, twice a week, we publish publicly on version 2.ai the progress for the autonomous fundraiser. And we talk about dollars raised, number of donors engaged, number of activities taken. We talk about the data around major gifts, matching gifts, planned gifts, human handoffs. And then we also talk about the opt-out rate, the major issues and the minor issues that the virtual engagement officer has experienced since the beginning. And I think that transparency is one of the most important aspects of the work we're doing. Not that we won't get it wrong sometimes, but being transparent about the things that we're learning is what the community has really ended up caring about the most.
How the senior leaders that you have had conversations with or have become partners in this exploration, I want to bring it back to the idea of digital labor plans. How are they looking at this either as a test or maybe a permanent solution to the work that they do? Where does it fit into their staffing models? Help me understand how they view quote unquote digital labor.
Yep. Yeah. So under the umbrella of our belief, and I think the industry's belief, that there's a labor shortage for frontline fundraisers, in that our mission is to provide trusted digital labor in the form of VEOs or other specified digital agents that do specific things. Basically, what we're finding is that every organization right now is in really a test, an R&D, a build phase. The virtual engagement officer has been live for about 4 months at the first cohort, and it's raised over $500,000. So there are now 3 cohorts that are up and running, or that are about to be up and running. The third cohort, I think, starts in 2 or 3 weeks. But the first cohort was truly R&D around the technology. Is this going to be the extreme cases of AI that everyone was concerned about in June, July, and August? If you listen to some of the podcasts, or if you go back and look at some of the comments on any of the posts out there about the work that we were doing, there were a lot of folks that said the work we're doing is unethical or immoral or wrong, and that frontline fundraising should only be done by humans. Somebody even went as far as to say that an organization that can't afford to hire traditional frontline fundraisers should not fundraise. Their organization should go out of business. And they were wrong. The first cohort proved that the technology won't have any of the long, extreme implications that people were concerned about. The second cohort was a progression on the first cohort. Since the technology and the R&D was completely sort of satisfied, the second cohort is about use cases. R&D around use cases. How can this technology be used to solve the biggest problems at every organization? The third cohort will be defined by finding use cases that we can accelerate. And the fourth cohort will be defined by essentially defining digital labor and using the digital labor concept to really narrow it in to correspond and correlate with job descriptions that organizations have on their website. So we'll be releasing a virtual stewardship officer and a virtual gift officer soon, in addition to a virtual engagement officer. But basically, from the first cohort, all 13 leaders are now putting together a 3 to 5 year digital labor plan with the belief that they're not going to hit their next campaign goals if there's not traditional labor augmented and combined and working collaboratively with digital labor. And so, maybe that looks like a virtual engagement officer this year, but 3 virtual engagement officers next year, maybe 1 for athletics, 1 for alumni relations and engagement, and then 1 to manage some of the rated but unassigned donors. What does the organization look like over the next 3 to 5 years? And how is digital labor complementing and really working with the traditional labor plans? That's what we're seeing. But again, not one of those organizations are advocating to change the ratios of 80 frontline fundraisers to 1 virtual engagement officer. They're not going down in frontline fundraisers. The 3-year plan for them is 100 frontline fundraisers and 5 virtual engagement officers. And I think that's probably where every organization is going to go. I believe that in 5 years, most organizations, if not all nonprofit organizations, will have some form of digital labor supporting their efforts in fundraising.
I'm seeing a lot of impassioned posts on LinkedIn and point of views shared about that not losing the human component, the human-centered approach to philanthropy work. How are some of the leaders that you're working with integrating or finding a balance between having digital staffing and not losing sight of? Can you give some of the sort of practical strategies or approaches that they're taking to ensure that there is a strategic balance there?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest learnings, and we always talk about these in terms of learnings because we're learning so much every day, being the first company that actually has data today. And we work really hard to not talk about, 6 months down the road, 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road. We talk about what we learned today. And it's February 13th, 2025. And what we've learned today is that essentially virtual engagement officers, we haven't seen any gift officers being replaced or even come close to being replaced by virtual engagement officers. What we have seen replaced are direct mail pieces, blind email solicitations, sometimes augmenting student callers, because there's a place for student callers. But the idea that student callers should come into an office for 4 hours and call 200 donors, most of those donors that either hang up or are rude to the student callers, that process should change. And we keep finding over and over that if you can find a way to use a virtual engagement officer to schedule calls for a student caller, it's not that alumni or donors don't want to talk to student callers. It's actually that they just don't want to be called and harassed at the times that they don't want to be called and harassed. The most impactful opportunities we can give our alumni and donors are the ability, in higher ed to connect with students and to ask them thoughtful questions, to have really great informed conversations. Donors love hearing from students. They love hearing about the impact that their dollars make. But the way that we have been doing in the past is wrong. So, you look at, I think you talked to Dan Frezza, we're working with their student caller program to book the student callers' days so that they don't have to do this blind cold outreach to donors during dinner time, that they come into the office and they have meetings scheduled for them. But it's a great example of how you're not replacing the people there. You're actually changing the direction in which the process goes to schedule those meetings and giving donors and students the ability to have really informed conversations. But over the next 5 years, we're going to continue to see that unless organizations think that they can hire enough frontline fundraisers to do the work that they need to do over the next 5 years and get to the donors they need to get to, that digital labor will continue to go down the giving pyramid and really start cannibalizing a lot of the direct mail, a lot of the really cold one-way communications that only have a singular ask in them, that are really outdated and can be done better.
Yeah. A lot of the examples you shared kind of remind me of the opportunity or watch outs around Day of Givings that institutions do. I think there's so much work that goes into it, the scale of preparation and execution on that day and the stewardship follow-up afterward. It kind of brings out the best of advancement teams. And I also think sometimes it brings out the worst of the nature of our work, and seeing unsubscribes shoot up because of the volume of outreach from that day. Are you experimenting, or are your platforms being used for that specific type of opportunity yet?
For Days of Giving?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think the best example we have of Day of Giving is Bucknell, their virtual engagement officer. On the Day of Giving, the virtual engagement officer's portfolio represented 21% of the total Day of Giving donations that were made. And Bucknell's virtual engagement officer has been off the charts. It's raised over $200,000 in about 3.5 months from its portfolio. But You think about days of giving. There's been 3 different days of giving, and the VEO has outperformed almost the entire team collectively in terms of engagement and revenue. It's just extraordinary because, and it's not that the frontline fundraisers are doing a bad job. It's that as people, we can only send so many emails, and we can only personalize our experience and our outreach in our communications. We can only be thoughtful for so many different communications and donors that we're working with. There is a limit, and there's an upper limit, even with generative AI, even with AI enablement, even with efficiency tools. There's an upper limit to what we can do. The virtual engagement officer, autonomous AI, there's definitely an upper limit, but we're looking at a 10 to 20 magnitude, improvement on what humans can do. But the virtual engagement officer, I don't think right now or in the near future, we'll be able to inspire donors the way traditional frontline fundraisers do, the way I did. There were things that I did. There were ways that I was able to connect with a person, with a donor, that I don't think will be duplicated or replicated. Even if it could, I don't think it should. I think that there's such an important role for traditional fundraisers. And me and my team, we keep advocating for fundraiser training, for fundraiser enablement, for frontline fundraiser education, going all the way back to college. It should be a career path for frontline fundraisers that are well trained, that get out of college, that want to have a career in fundraising. And that career is always going to be there. But the idea that of the aggregate of all of those careers, of all the people in fundraising, that only 5% of the entire donor pool across the United States is covered by traditional frontline fundraisers means that there's maybe 50, 60% of donors that could be engaged by people, but aren't. And that math is definitively where the future of fundraising is going and where autonomous AI has to fit in to make a difference if we're going to hit these campaign goals. And Dan, really more importantly, if we're going to cure cancer, if we're going to eliminate food insecurity in a city like New York or Boston or Chicago, it's not going to be done by hiring more fundraisers. The ratio of fundraisers to dollars being raised, there aren't enough frontline fundraisers out there to solve one of those problems. Traditional frontline fundraising, accelerated and working collaboratively with autonomous AI, is the only way that some of these issues that are so large will be solved and will make a dent in them. I think everyone can get on board for cancer research. Children's hospitals are I have 6 kids, so a place that's near and dear to my heart. But AI to accelerate cures for anything related to children is something I feel passionately about. And we always get this question about, how should you use AI? Why should you use AI? And the answer is simple. We're applying it to frontline fundraising, we are purely and definitively on the right side of history. That if anybody believes that any parent with a child that's sick doesn't want the most accelerated technology to be accelerated even faster to solve that problem for that parent with their child, they're wrong. We're dealing with life or death situations in a lot of different areas when it comes to fundraising being applied to cures, to diseases. And I just feel so strongly that we should be accelerating faster in the application and deployment of autonomous AI to fund some of these most important missions that are out there.
Yeah. No, I've been in-house for nearly the last 8 years at a large university, trying to encourage my former team to embrace different AI tools. The adoption and advancement is slow. I see other areas, let's just say maybe central marketing communications or admissions marketing, starting to experiment with tools a little bit more. But I think we're still very, very early on in the beginning stages. So if you think about advancement professionals who are maybe trialing personally for their work, but it's not embedded in their role in any true way on paper, or their advancement division hasn't led some type of strategic initiative to outline, here's all the tools we're going to make available to you, here are the expectations, here's the support. What advice can you give to the everyday practitioner who maybe knows they're behind, wants to catch up, might not have a framework yet from their advancement team for how to do that?
Yeah, so there's 2 different suggestions. First is to really understand the distinction between AI enablement to make the people that you have more efficient and autonomous AI. They are 2 very different approaches. And looking forward in the next 5 years, campaigns are only going to get bigger. Very few organizations say, listen, we're going to raise $1 billion. We raised $1 billion in our last campaign. We're going to raise $500 million in our next campaign. They're all bigger. So if you think about that concept of everything is getting bigger, our people have to be more efficient and better, and our technology has to support them in better ways. So the first suggestion is to really evaluate whether your priority is to make the people you have 2 or 3 times more efficient, or if it's to duplicate the efforts of the people you have so that those fantastic and amazing people, that their output can be replicated in other areas of the giving pyramid would be the first. The second is, whether it's us or anybody else, have conversations. I mean, reach out to me, reach out to my team, reach out to anybody else working on autonomous AI. Since I've been little, there are technologists, there are bleeding edge technologists. I've tasked my team with inventing the bleeding edge. So, we're having conversations every single day with presidents, with boards, with committees, and just trying to educate them. And sometimes the outcome is, yep, this is what we wanted 5 years ago. We want to be part of the next cohort. Sometimes the outcome is, we're not quite ready for this yet, but we understand it's a priority. I think every organization and every leader should be tasked not with determining whether autonomous AI will be a part of the future, because it will be. It definitively will be. We all have enough data to say that AI will not stop tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or in 5 years. The question that every leader has to answer for themselves and for their organization is, where does this fit into their priorities? If hitting their campaign goal in 3 years is their biggest priority, then they need a 3-year labor plan and digital labor plan. But they need to find a way for both of those to accelerate. If organizations are getting started in 3 to 5 years, everybody thinks that they're going to be left behind. They're not going to be left behind. Big organizations are not going to be left behind, but they're not going to be as good as they can be. They're not going to make the impact that they could have made if they had evaluated and adopted autonomous AI early on. And I think for us, at least, my team, I've tasked my team with being collaborative in truly an R&D approach where every organization is a little bit different. So how can we tweak this just a little bit to make sure that your donor pool, that your use case works? And my belief is that, just like training data, with enough of it, you get good outcomes. With enough great use cases, more organizations can accelerate the adoption of autonomous AI. But we're still early. I think we're the organization with actual results. But I think that leaders should be really looking at those two aspects of the question. If they do that, then I think they'll be in good shape.
Want to know what AI-powered people-focused really looks like? The 2025 Engage Summit will show you how AI transforms engagement without losing the human touch. Join us June 24th and 25th in Charlotte, North Carolina for actionable insights, hands-on demos, and transformative strategies. Enrollify listeners save $50 with the code Enrollify50. Sign up at engage.element451.com.
Besides leaders and their in-house teams, there are a lot of other partners in this profession trying to help move their organizations and their philanthropic work forward. For example, a lot of consultants that will help with the feasibility assessment, organizational assessments, feasibility studies, and so forth. Where are others who might be adjacent to you or adjacent to those same senior leaders with their understanding of digital staffing, or how do you build this into a campaign staffing plan for multi-year success?
Yeah. So consultants have been so extraordinary in their partnership with autonomous AI. And I only speak on behalf of my team, but we've spoken with so many different consultants that, probably in the magnitude of hundreds, if not maybe 400 or 500 individual consultants, and also firms that have come to us and said, listen, could you send over some data? Because, I'm pitching a feasibility study and I want to make sure I get this right. Consultants are not technologists, and technologists are not consultants. My team, we don't claim to do the work consultants do, and consultants certainly don't claim to do the work we do building autonomous AI. And I think what consultants have really done a great job of over the last year or so is knowing that there's a place for autonomous AI and for organizations like mine to make a difference, but really want to be collaborative in learning in the communication of the data. We've sent, and I say this for everybody, if there are any consultants listening, reach out to my team. We'll send you all the information we have. And we're the only game in town right now, but there will be so many folks that do the work that we're doing in the next 5-10 years, because the industry is huge and there can't just be one player. For consultants, reach out. We're happy to give you any information that you want, that you can use to educate your clients, because I think the consultants that are still saying AI is not going to be a part of the future are categorically wrong. We sort of all know that. They're on the wrong side of history. So consultants are really wrestling with the fact that they're not tech companies, but they still have to talk intelligently and really in a futuristic way about where technology fits. And I think they've really partnered with us well and collaborated with us well on that concept of digital labor plans, because they're the ones that are helping organizations put together their traditional labor plans. They're the ones who talk about sort of what the pyramid looks like. And the reality is that there still hasn't been an answer for what happens after the 4% of donors that are assigned. What do we do from the 5% to the 20% that are rated but unassigned? Digital labor plays a role in there. And I think consultants have just been extraordinary in their partnership of the adoption of this technology.
I want to go back to maybe it's a concern or a risk from senior leaders that you've heard voiced. It's certainly a question that I've heard. I just got back from presenting a session on advancement marketing communications at the Case District 2 conference a couple of days ago, and outlining some of the opportunities around AI was part of that, among other themes. And got some questions around transparency. With autonomous AI, what do you have a default point of view? How are you guiding your cohorts and senior leaders on that question around transparency? How much do we want donors and alumni or other audiences to know? And any thinking around that would be helpful.
Yeah, so there's two perspectives that I feel really strongly about. First of all, a person should never be fooled by AI. A donor should never think they're talking to a human fundraiser when they are talking to an autonomous fundraiser. So we've built guardrails around the virtual engagement officer to make sure that it is very clear that the donor is working with a virtual engagement officer and an artificial intelligence autonomous AI. But second, I think for us, and we continue to learn over and over and over, that for some reason over the last 5-10 years, AI leaders have wanted to put AI into this idea that AI is a black box, that you put a whole bunch of data in and you get this result out, but you don't know what happens in that box. And for us, if you look on the version2.ai website, you'll see two different categories for issues: major issues and minor issues. Minor issues are defined for us by essentially issues that have come up that organizations have raised concerns about, but that we can get to the bottom of. We know why they happen. So whether they're data input, whether there's something wrong with our technology, or there's something wrong, we can definitively go back to the organization and say, here's what happened. It was a mistake. It was our fault, or it was this problem, but we know why it happened, and it didn't ruin the relationship between the donor and the organization or really make it detrimental. A major issue for us has two components. One, it has to be so severe that it really, from the organization's point of view, not ours, but from the organization's point of view, they have to believe that it really, really did harm to the relationship between the donor and the organization. An example of a minor issue might be writing to you, Dan, and calling you Don. And that might tick you off, but you're not going to never give to the organization again because your name was misspelled. The second component is that we can't get to the bottom of it. So not knowing what happened, not knowing why an issue happened, that concept of a black box, we just haven't seen it. I mean, the virtual engagement officer is managing 14,000 donors. It's had 21,000 activities with donors and has engaged 2,500 donors to date. And there haven't been any major issues where there was a problem and we couldn't get to the bottom of why it happened. Maybe our transformers broke. Maybe we ran out of compute power a couple of weeks ago and everything kind of shut down mid-conversation because we ran out of compute power. We had to increase our compute power because the VO was engaging with so many donors, and it just kind of stopped for about 20 minutes. And we heard from a couple organizations that the donors were having great engagement with the VEO, but then it just stopped. We ran out of compute power. We know why that happened. But that concept of transparency, I think, is really important. And for anybody that's evaluating AI systems, if you look at Waymo has 3 different sensors. It has LiDAR, it has radar, and it has video. Those 3 sensors definitively determine what the car does next. So it takes in all that data. It makes a decision about whether it should go straight, go backwards, slow down, speed up. And that concept of, it's not a black box. It's taking data that we know where it's coming from. We're putting it in transformers, and the transformers determine what happens next. This sense, solve, go autonomous AI framework, it's very logical. And you can always, if a Waymo crashes, you know exactly why. The data that came in, it mistook, a cat for a boulder for a pothole, and it didn't know what to do. But getting to the bottom of what happened is kind of simple. AI doesn't have to be a black box. And I think that for anybody who's scared of AI in sort of the really extreme nature, believes that you're going to put data in that it doesn't know what's going to happen. Verticalized AI that is the AI we're building for frontline fundraisers and to replicate the efforts of frontline fundraisers. We know why it makes mistakes, and we're working on fixing it. But essentially, there should be no black box. That concept of transparency should be the starting point for where organizations partner with AI companies, not the endpoint. Or it's too important. It should be transparent.
Yeah. Adam, another challenge that I've heard voiced is privacy around data. Donor data is sensitive, certain types of donor data. To your example of hospitals and children's hospitals, if those are types of organizations that might be using sensitive data as well. Can you talk to how current technologies, whether your platform or others, are attempting to create a safer environment where fundraising professionals like us can put more information in and feel confident that they're not violating any kind of policy or sharing something openly with AI that could be used to the detriment of the organization at some point?
Yeah. So I had a really good friend who told me once, and I'll never forget it. She said, essentially the best way to protect data is not to have the data. From our perspective, we have this Sense, Solve, Go framework, sort of similar to Waymo. And, Sense is all the data into the virtual engagement officer. Solve are the algorithms that sit on top. So the virtual engagement officer knowledge base, a bunch of the mimicking of simulations that we're doing, and a bunch of the mimicking of the data that we're doing to create really big data sets to be able to model off of. And then the Go and the Sense, Solve, Go is essentially AI to action. So whether it's a handwritten note, a text message, an email, an introduction to a dean, that concept of Go really sort of goes back into Sense. And then Sense takes the data and then starts that process again. You sort of think about it as a cyclical nature. You can go on the website and see diagrams of it. But essentially, in the Sense portion, it's aggregating data. And for us, we only take 12 data points from the organization about the donor. And those are data points that would be given to any frontline fundraiser. And when you think about what frontline fundraisers have access to right now, in the database, it's kind of crazy. There's 20 years of contact reports. There's a whole bunch of information in there that I personally think should be scrubbed every year. I don't think we need to know, the details of a donor's life 20 years ago to make an informed decision about whether we should reach out to them to invite them to an event. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it seems like more of a liability for every organization to have, years and years of data that, might not be relevant to a solicitation today about something. But essentially for us, there are 3 different data sources or 4 different data sources that we're taking. The first are 12 to 15 different data points from the organization. So knowing the donor's first name, last name, email, phone number. Then we take data from the individual conversations, the back and forth, the live data from the communications that the donor's having. So if the VEO receives a response to the email that it sent to the donor, it evaluates that response and tries to understand whether it's positive or negative or what the sentiment is, how it should respond. The VEO is taking organizational data, so data from the websites and from LinkedIn. And the thesis for us and the VEO is that the best frontline fundraisers, as a frontline fundraiser, I know I would come into the office every morning, I'd go to the organization's website and I'd look at their LinkedIn and I'd look at the posts and I would take 1 or 2 of those posts and I'd forward them along to a donor. And I would use those posts to inspire a donor to do something. And essentially what I was doing was taking an organization's concept of sort of a one-to-many approach where they're putting something out on LinkedIn for a lot of people to look at. And I'm taking the many part and bringing it down to one to inspire a donor to make a gift. That's what the VEO is doing. And so the VEO doesn't look at any data from a website or from the organization that isn't marketing approved. It's not scouring forums or anything like that. The VEO is included on all of the staff emails, on all of the marketing emails, and uses those to communicate with donors. But when you think about what a frontline fundraiser does on the first day of work, they get access to the database. They're added to all the email communications. They go through LinkedIn, make sure they're updated on all that. That's what the VEO is doing, and it's all marketing approved. So, and that's been really important for us. So when we think about data, we think about the least amount of data we can take about the donor, because we don't believe that past giving or past data really impacts the communications that we should be having with donors. It really is more about the things that the donors are engaging in and how can we get them to engage. So, when we think about data, it really is less is more for us and less is safer.
And we've done a great job breaking down, I think, the inner workings of how does this technology actually work and what's possible, frankly, right now, even if a lot of folks out there don't even realize that this type of opportunity exists. But I want to ask you just to kind of think a little bit bigger picture. And maybe these are some of the bleeding edge plans that you have in store for your business, or just opportunities at large that you see for the world of philanthropy. But if you could project out 3 years from now, maybe 5 years from now. And I know it's hard because every day OpenAI or somebody is introducing some kind of change. So the pace of change right now around AI technology is so quick. But what are some of the other big opportunities and potential or likely applications that you see for this type of technology or maybe yet another advanced state of AI usage a couple of years from now?
You look at OpenAI, you look at all of the language generation companies out there. That is really a generative layer. It really is meant for horizontal application. So it's meant for anybody to use for any application, but it takes the person to verticalize it. What we're doing is essentially taking all that's available with the horizontal AI and making it really, really, really specific for this one really narrow use case, which is moving donors through a moves management process, engaging donors, inspiring donors. We want to use the technology to replicate what the very best frontline fundraisers can do. But in the future, what I believe in short term, we'll be releasing this next week, and this will probably be out after that. But we're going to be announcing the world's first virtual stewardship officer. The idea that great stewardship should be applied not just to our major donors, but to all donors on a really personal, engaging way to drive retention. That will be important. But I think the future, you look 3-5 years out, I think that every organization will have virtual engagement officers. They'll have virtual gift officers. They'll have virtual stewardship officers. And each one of those roles will complement the work that the traditional frontline fundraisers are doing. And whether it's pipeline generation, engagement for mid-level donors, or inspiring sort of live bunts, side bunts, non-donors to be part of the organization that are way more lapsed, I think that there's a role for digital labor and fundraising that's so strong that doesn't replace any people. Even in 10 years, 15 years, I still think fundraising is going to be a booming career. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 times what it is now. And the hope is that as it grows, digital labor will be able to complement the growth of fundraising, because there would be nothing better than more people going in to raise money for some of the world's most important missions. We can all agree on that. How does digital labor play a role there? It's certainly not in replacing those people, because they're only doing about 5% of the work that we really need them to do. We can use digital labor to maybe get to 7 to 10% of the work that traditional frontline fundraisers are doing, while expanding the number of frontline fundraisers we have. But I think that's going to be the future.
Fantastic. Adam, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to make sure that the audience walks away with?
That concept of being on the right side of history is something I go to sleep with at night and wake up with every morning. Like I said, I've tasked my team and myself and my family and our partners not to be technologists, not to be bleeding edge technologists, but to invent the bleeding edge. And I think that inventing the bleeding edge on the right side of history, there are a lot of applications for AI that might be in a gray area of morals or ethics, but categorically and definitively, autonomous AI applied to frontline fundraising to accelerate the missions of some of the organizations doing some of the most important work in the world, I believe is one of the best applications of AI. And my hope is that whether you're a customer, whether you're a partner, whether you're somebody that wants to learn, that more people get involved in this conversation. Because the truth is that if we can double the labor that we have with frontline fundraisers and duplicate that effort with digital labor, is not going to encroach on the frontline fundraisers' jobs. It's going to accelerate the missions that these organizations are really set out to accomplish and achieve. You think about women's shelters, you think about eradicating homelessness, you think about some cancer, you think about pediatric care. There are so many causes that we can all get behind and say, no, definitively, with enough money and enough people, we would love to eradicate those problems. That's what autonomous AI gives us a path to do. And I think that it's such an important conversation, but the idea that anybody's still arguing over whether we should be doing this, I think they're going to be on the wrong side of history. I think that how we do it well and how we do it thoughtfully in a way that accelerates organizations that we believe in the missions of, that will be where the folks who write the history end up. And I want to be leading that charge.
Well, Adam, thanks so much for joining us today. I think you've really given a broad and deep perspective on the opportunity for this type of technology to move organizations forward. It's clear it's not just about working smarter. It's about working smarter and harder, and fundamentally reshaping how organizations engage their donors, alumni relations. So for those tuning in, be sure to check out our next and final episode in the series coming out following week, where we'll explore what's next for AI in advancement and how institutions can future-proof their strategies. Lots to build from with this conversation with Adam. Thanks for listening. Advancement Amplified, AI for IA. We'll see you next time.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. And we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.